It was the $35 billionaire renewables project to build a gigantic solar farm in the Northern Territory and link it up with Singapore to provide them with energy. Sound far-fetched? Well, it was. This week, the project, led by billionaires Twiggy Forrest and Mike Canon-Brookes, fell through, and despite some wishful thinking from the NT government, is unlikely to go ahead. Joining me now to pick apart this incredible boondoggle and just what happened here is energy economist Alan Moran. Alan, thank you so much for talking us through this complicated project, but was this Sun Cable project ever going to work, or was it always just an ego project from a pair of billionaires?
Well, I think in retrospect, you'd have to say the latter. It was an ego project, but a lot of people took it quite seriously for a while, even though if it was to be successful, it would have broken a great many records on very many different levels. You know, the $35 billion that you've mentioned, well, they'd already burned their way through $260 million without any concrete evidence that they were getting anywhere with it. And that's when they pulled the plug. In retrospect, you'd say, well, you know, this is a 5,000-kilometer cable, mostly underwater, 7 or 8 times as long as any cable in the world so far. It was going to have a grid solar of about twice what the present grid solar is. It was going to have batteries 10 times as many as we've got at the present time, and it was going to get all this power through this immense infrastructure, $35 billion of infrastructure, which means you've got to spend about $3 or $4 billion every year to maintain it. Basically, it was going to get there, and it was going to take 15% of Singapore's electricity market. Well, you know, it does seem ridiculous. These two people, Andrew Forrest and Mike Canon-Brookes, have both made a lot of money and been innovators in different theaters from energy, and they've both decided that they were going to get into energy. They're both of them pretty woke people. They've drank the Kool-Aid in terms of renewables. They see this as the new nirvana, and basically they were going so far until one of them, in fact, it was Forrest, has pulled the plug, possibly because he's been advised to do so. But he'd been previously spending, you know, he's been spending a lot of money in terms of renewables and hydrogen, etc. And it's difficult to see where any of that is going. In terms of Mike Canon-Brookes, well, we all know he basically had a go and some success in taking over AGL. But basically, AGL is a company which is being consolidated to what it has become, and it's now worth about a third of what it was worth 3 or 4 years ago, and doesn't seem to be going anywhere into the future. So they're both embarked on this energy journey, this seeing that renewables are the new nirvana, and they've come a cropper. I think, you know, you mentioned what the Australian government hasn't put much money itself into it. It has actually spent some money on something called 5B, which is going to be the technology involved. That isn't part of Sun Cable, but it's still the Australian government did put on our behalf $14 million into that. It may be successful, I don't know. But the thing about it is, and you mentioned the government itself has shown regrets. In fact, Chris Bowen has said he remains very upbeat and excited about Sun Cable's future, which he's described as being, you know, an integral part of the renewable energy superpower that Australia would be. And I think that this is a little bit disturbing that he's boosting it so much, because some people may even remember the ALP in the past, and with a different energy minister, a man called Rex Connor, had this great view, and he was going to be building, spending about the same as this, $35 billion in today's money, in a massive new project which was to take over the mining and energy sectors of Australia and to catapult us into some new world. And of course, it came a real cropper in the end, and it's just as well, because he would have taken over the energy sector of Australia, which has been responsible really for a great deal of our present living standards, and it would have been gone right into the doldrums. So there is a precedent for this, and whether or not Chris Bowen is keen to replicate the buffoonery of Rex Connor and take all this investment, I don't know, but it certainly is sounding as though he would like to do so, and that would be a disaster for the country.
Indeed. And Alan, I want to move on to Chris Bowen and the safeguard mechanism reforms which he has announced this week, or the beginning of the week, targeting big emitters here and abroad with a specific hit in regional areas. I mean, is this just basically Labor taking a second crack at a carbon tax, but this time, in a slightly sneakier way, still on steroids? How does this actually going to work? And what about their promise that people in regional areas would not be affected by the move to net zero?
Well, they clearly will be. I mean, we all will be affected and we are being affected. We've already seen it. Energy prices, which are double what they were as a result of that move, as move towards net zero. It'll get even worse if we do progress towards that. Essentially, if we go to net zero, we're looking at some of the data and how you would do it. You have to do it through batteries to ensure you get the ups and downs of energy ironed out. And we'll be talking about something like 2 or 3 times Australia's GDP just in batteries alone. So this is not going to work, or it's not going to work with any decent standard of living. And the latest thing he's put on is akin to a $75 a ton carbon tax, which the previous carbon tax, which was introduced by Labor in 2012 and was repealed by Abbott, was $23. So this is a massive increase, and it comes on top of other imposts we have already through renewable energy requirements and through various taxes and loans, etc., given to renewable energy at the expense of coal and to some degree gas. And these are the very, very policies that have driven up the price of energy so far. And certainly Bowen seems he's going to be doubling down on all this. He's got a tremendous belief that renewable energy will come good, but and he's taken his hell for leather down that path, and it's really going to be very painful before we come to understand that it is not the future. We cannot survive on high levels of renewable energy in any economy in the world.
Alan Moran, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your insights in explaining some pretty complicated stuff in ways that even someone like I can understand. So, Alan, thank you so much for that.